Just 6 seconds for me to connect this.
Good afternoon, campers. Welcome. We are so happy to have Brian West with us today, who is a Canadian radio host and voice actor. He is a current on-air host for chorus radio stations like Magic 106 and Y108. Brian can also be heard in many radio commercials that air across the country. Besides his career pursuits, Brian is a husband and dad of 2. His wife, Emily, is a host on the Weather Network morning show. Welcome, Brian. Thanks for joining us today.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So my first question for you is, when did you first get involved with the entertainment industry? Is it always something you wanted to do?
Well, no, it's not something that I thought I was going to do when I was a kid. But it turned out that when I was in high school, I did a co-op placement at a radio station, and I was in a band at the time, and I didn't know what to do for co-op. I think it was grade 11 or 12, and I didn't know what to do for co-op. And my co-op teacher was like, "You're in a band. Why don't you go and sit in at a radio station?" And I thought instantly, well, hey, that might be a way to get like my music on the radio, as if I've got like an in at the radio station. So I was like, yeah, let's do it. And I ended up co-oping at the radio station. And I found out very quickly that that's not a way to get your music on. Even if you have an in at the radio station, there's so many protocols that and different avenues you have to go through to get your music on the radio. And just being a co-op student, unfortunately, wasn't one of those avenues. So I didn't get my music on the radio, but it gave me an opportunity to see what radio is all about. It's so much more than just the person that you hear on the air, on the radio. There's, all the people behind the scenes, like the writers and the producers and the sales team and the engineers. And I got to learn a little bit about all the different departments that make a radio station work. And I thought, this is really, really cool. And it just sort of opened up my mind to a whole new thing to do in life. And I ended up, after high school, going to college for radio broadcasting. And this was in Ottawa. I grew up in Ottawa, and I went to Algonquin College in Ottawa. There was a 2-year radio broadcasting course there. And I took the program and ended up getting a job at the radio station that I had co-opted at in high school, because I kept in touch with them throughout the rest of high school and through college. I kept in touch with some of the on-air guys and the boss, the program director there. And I ended up getting a job at the radio station. And that was like, geez, I probably shouldn't even say how long ago that was. It was a long time ago, approaching 20 years, actually, which is scary.
Wow, that seems like it was a very interesting process. And it seems like you had a very interesting experience. My next question is, what does a typical day in the life look like for you?
Day in the life for me, well, everything is constantly show prep. You're always trying to figure out what you're going to talk about on the radio. And like you mentioned in the opening, I have 2 radio shows that I do. One in Guelph at Magic 106, which is a contemporary hit radio station, like a hot AC radio station. And then I have a show on Y108, which is the studio I'm in right now, for the afternoons, which is a rock station. So I'm constantly trying to figure out what I'm going to talk about on both of these radio shows. So my life is like show prep. Whatever, you hear a lot of people on the radio talking about experiences that they've gone through, things that have happened to them in their life. So, if something happens to me during the day, I might think, oh, this would be a good thing to talk about on Magic or on Y108, or sometimes on both. So a typical day for me is to get up, and I record my show in Guelph. So the show in Guelph runs from about 10:30 until 2. So I have to make sure I record that before 10:30. I've got a studio at my house in my basement where I do a lot of my voice acting work from, and as well the radio show in Guelph. So I will record my show in Guelph, that runs in Guelph. I record it from my house in my studio. So I do that first. And once that's finished, then I start going through more prep for my Y108 show that I have to do in the afternoon, and figure out what I'm going to talk about on that show. And in the meantime, I've got emails coming in with auditions for my voice acting career. So commercial auditions, narration auditions for TV shows. Sometimes there's some cartoon auditions that come in. So I'll in between all of this, I'll record auditions that I send out to the casting directors. I'm also the voice of radio stations in the States. So, the voice that you hear on the radio, that's not the on-air announcer. It's like the voice that comes on in between songs that says like, you're listening to Y108, or, you're listening to Magic 106 or whatever. That's called an imaging voice. And that's a whole other job in itself, where somebody gets scripts and they have to read the promos, and they read the different liners that happen in between songs. And I do that for some stations in the States as well. There's one in Miami that I do the voice for. There's one on Long Island, New York, that I do the voice for. I used to be in Nashville, in Utah. I used to be in Texas. So different cities across the States that I do. So they'll often email me stuff and say, hey, we need this promo for a contest that we're doing. Can you voice this? Can you read this for me? So I'll have to read that. So it's a lot of multitasking. I'll go from recording one show, which is in Guelph, to figure out what I'm going to talk about on Y108, to reading these commercials and promos for these stations in the States, to doing auditions. And all the while, I've got, like you mentioned in the opening, 2 kids at home that want lunch, or that want a snack or something. So there's a lot of multitasking and running in and out of the studio. But then I come into Y108 from 2 until 6. I'm live here, and I spend my afternoons here in Y108, and then I go home at 6 o'clock. And so my day runs from about 9 in the morning until about 6:30 in the afternoon. And then sometimes I'll get auditions from the West Coast, because I've got an agent in Los Angeles, and they'll sometimes send me auditions, at 5 o'clock their time, which will be more like 8 o'clock our time at night. And so it's sort of, you're always working in some way.
Wow, you certainly know how to keep yourself occupied, and it seems like you get around.
Yeah.
Can you think of a time during your career that you faced adversity, and how did you overcome it?
Well, one of the things about being on the radio is you have to have thick skin, and in the entertainment business in general, in voice acting as well. Like I mentioned, I do a lot of auditions throughout the day, and most of the auditions you don't get. You get there's a lot of rejection, and it's not that you're not good enough. It's just that you might not have the voice that they were looking for that specific project, for that commercial or a cartoon or whatever it is that you're auditioning for. You might just not have the exact voice that they were picturing in their head, so they pass on you, and you get rejected. And being on the radio, you've got people listening to you. Everything that you say, somebody's listening. And, sometimes you're thinking on your feet, and you might say something, and you might think, oh, I shouldn't have said that. But it's too late. It's gone out over the airwaves. So you have to have thick skin, because people will call you on things. And, especially with internet trolls these days, sometimes people can be nasty on Facebook or on Twitter. They can write mean things about you. So you've got to have thick skin and be able to just sort of brush that off. And you also have to be ready and prepared to move a lot in this business. Like I said, I'm from Ottawa. That's where I grew up, and that's where I went to school. But since then, I moved to Kingston, and I worked in Kingston. I moved to Mississauga. I worked in Kitchener. I worked in Hamilton here and in Toronto. So I've sort of moved around quite a bit, looking for the next job and the next work, because there's only so many positions in each radio station in each city. So you do have to sometimes be prepared to move. Luckily, I didn't have to move. Sometimes when people are first starting out, they have to move to like a really small town in northern Alberta somewhere to get their start, to get their foot in the door. Thankfully, I didn't have to do that. I didn't have to move out of Ontario. So, I'm still close to my family and whatnot.
That's very interesting. What advice do you have for children and youth looking to go into the entertainment industry?
If you're looking to get into the industry, well, there's a few things. Like I said, you have to have thick skin. So just be ready. Just be ready to hear no and get rejected, and don't worry about that. Just keep focusing on what you want to do. The other piece of advice that I have in this business is make sure you never burn a bridge. Make sure you never do something that could, come back and haunt you in the future, because it's a very small industry. I know somebody at a radio station in almost every province across Canada, because like I said, people move around so much. And because of that, you get to know and you work with people who will then move to different provinces and different areas, different cities. So if you do something wrong or something, bad to that person that then moves to BC, and then you're looking to get a job in Vancouver, and that person could say, oh no, I worked with him, he's a disaster to work with. You don't want to go anywhere near that guy. So you want to be a good person. You want to be nice. You want to be helpful. You want to always try to learn as much as you can about the industry, so that you can work it in. Like I said earlier, there's so many different fields within the entertainment industry. And if you can do more than one of those things, you're a bigger asset to a company. Like nowadays, just being on the radio is just one part of our job. We've got to be able to shoot video and edit video that we're going to put on Facebook or Instagram or on the website. So, you have to be able to shoot video and edit video. You have to be able to write some things. You have to be able to talk on the radio still. So there's a lot of production elements that are also involved. So I'd say just try and learn a little bit of everything. You don't have to be the best at everything, but try and learn a little bit of everything, and just do your best. I think that's the best advice I can give.
Yeah, I think that's great advice for the campers to have. How has COVID affected your job, or has it affected your job, and if so, in what ways?
Well, for me, I've still been coming into the station throughout the pandemic because there's nobody else here. So I was alone there's barely anybody in this building because everybody's working from home. So I've still been coming in. I've still been recording my Guelph show from my studio at home, and then coming into Y108 in the afternoon. So it hasn't changed that much for me personally doing my job. It has changed for the radio industry. I mean, when the pandemic first started, I first thing I noticed on the computer was the commercials were the commercial breaks were a lot shorter. There was a lot less commercials because a lot of businesses had to pull their advertising because they were closed or because they couldn't afford it anymore. And sometimes advertising is one of the first things that people yank from their budget. So, I mean, I noticed that right away, and it's slowly starting to come back now, which is good. Businesses are reopening and they want to get the word out there and they want to tell everybody about it. So it's coming back. But that's what I noticed in the radio industry with COVID was the lack of advertising. But for me personally, I still came into work here and it didn't really change for me. I did notice a lot less people calling into the show. And I think that's because people are busy at home, working from home. They've got their kids at home. They don't really have an opportunity to call in and make a request, like when they're just sitting at work at their office, maybe. So the phones have been a little lighter, not as many people calling in.
Yeah, it's great to see that you can get into the studio and work where you're comfortable. My last question for you today, Brian, is how did you get involved with Easter Seals?
Well, I got invited to come on today from my friend Cheryl, who has been a longtime listener of Y108, and back in the day used to call in a lot. And she invited me to come on today to do the virtual camp. It's too bad we couldn't do it in person, but it's great that we've got the technology that we can do it over YouTube like this.
That's great. So those are all the questions I have. Dory, I'll throw it back to you. Do we have any questions from YouTube?
No, not yet. We don't have any questions coming in. However, there is a few seconds of delay, so there might be some pop up in a second. Let's see if they've any questions asked.
Yeah, hit me with a question. What do you want to know about radio or about voice acting? I can try my best to answer for you.
Well, I've
Do you
got
want to?
one. Who do you think is the coolest person that you have, not coolest, but most famous person you could say that you've actually interviewed or like done a talk show with?
There's a few that come to mind. I was a big Guns N' Roses fan when I was growing up, and I had the opportunity to interview and meet Slash, who's the lead guitarist for Guns N' Roses, which was really cool. I was pretty nervous for that interview. I also got to interview Anthony Kiedis, the lead singer of the Red Hot Chili Peppers. When they came to Hamilton, I had an opportunity to interview him, which was really cool. And one of the biggest ones that I did as well, it was before he passed away. It wasn't too long before he passed away. It was Chris Cornell from Soundgarden. I had the chance to interview him when he was playing in Toronto, and I believe that was less than a year before he passed away. So that was a interesting opportunity that I had.
That'd been pretty cool, all right, to get to interview all those.
Yeah.
So we do have a question from Lucas. He wants to know, typically with the job you do at work, is it like you work as a team to accomplish tasks, or is it more of an individual work?
Well, the whole radio station works as a team, but as far as my on-air show goes, I get to decide what I want to talk about. It's just me in here. So I guess I'm the executive producer of my show as well. If I want to give myself a fancy title, I would be the executive producer and host of the Brian West Show. But there's a lot that goes into it. Like, we have a music director. A lot of people think that I get to pick the songs that I play, and that is one thing that I don't get to do. I get to decide what I want to talk about, and I get to talk about anything that I want to. But we have a music director whose job is to schedule the music for the entire day on the radio station. And they go through it all hour by hour and put the music in. And so you're not supposed to change things because they've put a lot of time and effort into the music for the day. So if you don't like a song that's played, it's not my fault.
That is interesting. I never knew that. I just assumed the host would get to pick the music.
Yeah, it used to be like that back in the day. You used to be able to play your own songs, but after they started doing a lot of research and focus groups, and they had a lot of time and money spent into what songs should get played, they would put together a playlist, and then they don't want you messing with it.
That is interesting. So there haven't been any more questions on the chat. However, what do you think your biggest accomplishment has been by working on it? Like, do you feel like you can accomplish a lot by doing this, or is there certain stuff that stand out?
Yeah, there's, I always wanted to, a few things that come to mind that are accomplishments of mine is on the voice acting side. I always wanted to be in a cartoon, and I had the opportunity to be in a show called Beyblade. This was quite a few years ago. It was an older Beyblade series, and I got to be the lead character. His name was Zero Kirigani, and I had the opportunity to do that for a couple of years, and that was something that I always wanted to do. And I also always wanted to be the voice of a radio station, so that imaging voice that I was talking about before that comes on in between songs that's not the host. That was something when I first got into radio I thought was so cool. I was always like, who is that person, that voice? Because you don't know them. They don't work for the station. They're an independent contractor, and they do numerous stations across North America or the world in some cases. And I always thought that would be so cool to do that. And I've had the opportunity to do that as well, like I was mentioning, for some stations in the States. So those two things in the voice acting world are pretty big accomplishments that I'm proud of. And in radio, I always wanted to do a morning show, and I did a morning show for almost 4 years when I was in Kitchener. I was the host of a morning show for a station there. And I found out how much I don't like getting up at 3:15 in the morning. That really, really is hard. No matter what time you go to bed, getting up at 3:15 hurts every day. So I like this show. Doing the afternoon show from 2 to 6 is it's good hours. I get to sleep in a little bit, and it's nice.
Yeah, getting up at 3:15 definitely sounds like it would be tough, all right?
Oh man, yeah.
So I think that is it for the questions. Or if you could actually be like the voice of any one character, who do you think it would be? Like if you could just pick one character you love to voice, would it be one
Well,
that
I'd
was
love to
standard?
be. I'd love to sometime. I mean, it's way out there, but it'd be really cool to do a voice like on The Simpsons or on Family Guy because I used to watch those cartoons, and to be able to do a voice on one of those shows. Or the ultimate would be like in a Disney movie, but they seem to always use now like celebrities in Disney movies now. Sort of like ever since Robin Williams was the genie in Aladdin, and they seem to always go with celebrities now, which is unfortunate for people like me that are just wanna. But maybe as an extra or something someday, I could do a Disney movie. That would be pretty awesome.
Yeah, that definitely would be pretty cool. I think everybody would love to be in a Disney movie at some stage.
Yeah.
Also, we actually have another question. It's when you went to school for your job, was the program structured?
Sorry, say that again.
When you went to school for the job you're doing, was it the program that you did? Was it a structured program, or was it kind of more like kind of pick and choose what you did?
It was specifically a radio broadcasting course, so which was really good because it was really hands-on. You got to there was production studios at school. There was a radio station there at the school, so you could have your own show on the radio station. And like I said, there's so many different departments, and by your year 2, you got to pick which one of those departments you wanted to focus on. So there was a sales department, there was a sales team, there was the production department where you could make the commercials. There was on air where you could have your own show on the radio station. There was writers that would write the commercials, and so it was very, very hands-on. And like I really recommend those courses because for me, it you know, maybe in high school I wasn't like the number one student, but in college I really thrived because it was like getting to do the work and actually getting to try it. And we spent numerous hours in the studios. We'd go in on weekends because it was fun, and it was a lot of work, but it was fun work, and it was work that you could do. It wasn't just writing, you know, an essay. It was actually producing something and coming up with a product. It was awesome.
Very good. So I think that is it from our end of things. Unless Casey, do you have a question you'd like to ask him?
No, not at this point.
No, you're good. Perfect.
Do you want to see what
Yeah.
the studio looks like in here? I could show you what the studio looks like.
Oh,
Sure.
yeah, definitely.
Here, let
Okay.
me take my phone off of my little tripod here, and I can show you. So this is the well, there's the microphone, but this is the soundboard. Each one of these buttons has a function. It's how you put things on the air, like a phone call or the music or our microphone. And this is the computer system, where I don't know if you can see that, but everything that gets played on the radio comes off of this computer. So all the commercials, all the music, all the IDs and promos that you hear, all of it is scheduled on the computer now. So we don't have to put CDs in anymore, or it's all MP3. It's all on computers. So I'll just show you from afar. We've got a lot of computers. We've got 2 computers over there that's for recording phone calls and editing phone calls and playing like audio that you hear on the radio show, plus our internet computer. And then we've got the 2 computers over here that have all the music and commercials and everything that you hear on the radio comes off of those. And
Wow.
that's what it looks like in here. And it's just me all by myself.
That's pretty intense.
Yeah. A lot of buttons, but it's a little overwhelming when you first start because you're like, what do I press? But once you get to know everything, it's pretty easy.
Yeah.
It definitely looks like it would be something that you could easily mess up if you're not used to it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and that happens. And when you first start out, you have to be ready to make mistakes. But usually, you only make those mistakes once, and then you're like, I'm never gonna do that again. Like leaving your microphone on when you're not on the air or something. That's happened to, I think, everybody.
Yeah, I could see that being an easy mistake to have done at least once.
Yeah.
All right, thank you very much, Brian, for showing us that and for answering all the questions we have had, and also Casey for introducing him and asking him the questions. So unless there's anything else, I think that is. Thank you.
Yeah, hey, thanks for
Yeah.
having me. It was great. And, you can always reach out to me if you have any other questions. You can email me. My email is brian@y108.ca. So if you ever have a question that you want to ask about radio or voice acting, by all means, send me an email.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And as you were just saying that, we just got one more question in, and it was,
Sure.
do you ever feel lonely when you're in the studio by yourself?
Yes, actually, you can feel kind of lonely in here because you spend about 4 hours in this studio, and I'm in my home studio before that by myself. So there is a lot of time by yourself, which sometimes is a good thing. You get a little break from everybody, but you can definitely feel a little bit lonely. Now, we've got Facebook and we've got Instagram and Twitter, and we're constantly updating that on the station accounts throughout the afternoon. So I'm busy doing that as well as figuring out what I'm going to say and taking phone calls. So sometimes the time goes by really quickly, but there can be a slow day where you are really well prepped, so you know what you're going to say, and you're just sort of sitting in here, and it can be a little bit lonely, especially during COVID because there's nobody else in the building to come and visit me.
Oh, true. Yeah, that would definitely be. So somebody else has just asked one more question. Sorry. Do you have a website where we can hear some of your voiceovers?
Yeah, absolutely. It's brianwestvo.com. So if you go to brianwestvo.com, there's examples of some of my demos are up there for commercials and for radio imaging and for animation, some of my animation voices. And there's also some examples up there of some of the shows that I've narrated before on HGTV. I think there's a link up there for a couple of those shows. So by all means, yeah, check out my website and have a look.
Great. Thank you. I've just put that into the chat there on YouTube, so everybody should be able to see it as well. Yeah, so thank you very much, Ryan and Casey. We appreciate you coming in to talk to our East of Sales campers, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you very much for having me.
You too.
And like I said, send me a message if you have any questions.